Good afternoon, everyone. This is Joe Papano from FiberLink Communications. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar. It's our second in a three-part series we're doing on iOS 5. Obviously, kind of probably the biggest event in the mobility space, certainly in the last few months, and probably for the next few as well. And so we'll recap a little bit the webinar we did 2 weeks ago, which was kind of an intro, high-level intro to iOS 5. But today we're actually going to dive a little bit deeper and get in under the covers and give people kind of more information about features they can take advantage of in iOS 5 and how you can use those to make an iPhone behave in the way you want in your environment. So we've got Josh Lambert from our product management team here today. He's certainly our resident iOS 5 and Apple expert. Hi, Josh.
Hello, Joe. Hello, everyone.
And we're going to follow the format we usually follow. So we've got about 30 minutes of slideware, and we're going to do a quick demo in Maz 360 since we are iOS 5 ready and capable. Show you how you can take advantage of some of these iOS 5 features with Maz 360. And after that, we'll do a little bit of Q&A, and we will do our best to tackle your questions. You can send them in via chat or the Q&A panel. We're also going to run some polls during the webinar, so we'd appreciate folks participating in those as well, and we'll share the results with you as we do them. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Josh.
All right, thanks, Joe. As Joe mentioned, we're going to talk about new iOS 5 policy controls. This is the second webinar of our three-part webinar series on iOS 5. And so today we're going to talk about a quick recap on iOS 5, just to set a baseline and make sure everyone's on the same page here. And if anyone's not aware of some of the features, we can kind of cover them quickly. After that, we'll start a deep dive look at all the iOS 5 policy management capabilities. These are functions that are new in iOS 5 that weren't there previously. So we'll talk a bit about them, what you can do, and some tidbits of information you might want to think about when controlling these settings and features. Last, we'll have a quick demo of managing these exact same policies that we're talking about previously in our Maz 360 MDM product, which you can try out as well at the end of our call here. All right, so as you're talking about, here's the details on our webinar series. 2 weeks ago, and on the 13th, we had our introduction call for iOS 5. We kind of talked about the major features that were new in iOS 5, things like Newsstand and Siri and other functionality as well, like iCloud. And I talked about how that would impact your enterprise and some things you want to think about. And today, as you mentioned before, we're going to do a little more detail on the exact policy management features you can take to control some of those features. And then in 2 weeks, on November 10th, we'll talk about the more in-depth and new app management features that so definitely stay tuned for that one. That one should be pretty exciting. Also, if you attend all three of these webinars, you'll be automatically entered to win an iPhone 4S in our drawing at the end of our webinar series. Okay, so this is probably a recap for most of you, but iOS 5 was released on the 12th of October. It is the next major version of iOS. It's supported on all iPhones 3GS and above. So the iPhone 3G was supported previously in iOS 4. It's no longer. So that one is being left behind, so to speak. And the 3GS and above are being supported for iOS 5. iPod Touch 3rd Gen and above, as well as all iPads, are supported. So probably most of your deployments out there are most likely going to be able to support this new version. It is a very large release. There's a lot of new features, 200 plus new features to be specific. These are including things like iCloud, iMessage, Notification Center, Newsstand reminders, Siri, which has been proven pretty popular, but that one, just so you know, is restricted right now for just the iPhone 4S, and it actually is in quote beta right now. But it is pretty popular from what we've heard at least. The other major feature and functionality that's on iOS 5 is actually doesn't require any type of computer anymore. So you don't have to worry about iTunes being present on a PC. You don't have to hook it into a USB cable for it to activate. Essentially everything that you used to require iTunes for, backup, syncing, as well as activation can all be done over the air without a PC. So you can now actually release some of these iPads and things like that and these tablets out into the wild without actually having a laptop to go along with them, which is a great improvement there.
Yeah, and for the folks who missed our first webinar, this was one of the features we touched on there, and we asked people a polling question during that webinar, kind of the major features, and most of them are listed here, which are the most important to you. It was that PC-free, that kind of over-the-air ability to now manage the devices that was viewed as the most popular feature. So I'm sure that's kind of coming from an IT perspective. End users would probably have picked something else, but still great feature nonetheless. We're going to open up our first poll right now, and we're simply asking if you're an iPhone or iPad user, have you upgraded your device to iOS 5 yet? I upgraded my iPad a couple weeks ago.
All right. Well, while we're waiting for that to come in about 20 seconds here, we can start to go a quick chat about some of the new controls we're adding here in iOS 5. And these are things that we'll go into more detail in the following slides. So there's new restrictions. Restrictions are things that let you actually take control of certain features, disable them, or set certain parameters. This includes things like iCloud, Siri, and some of the security functionality. We're also going to talk about some enhancements that were made to the ActiveSync portion. This is the mail protocol that's used to communicate with Exchange, as well as servers like Lotus Notes Traveler. And then we'll also go through some of the new Wi-Fi settings that have been added. Proxy support is definitely a big one that's been added there. It's pretty popular, as well as some of the roaming settings as well. All right, so I think, are we done with the poll there? Or?
Yeah, I think hopefully you can all see the results. So looks like most folks, 80% plus, have in fact upgraded to iOS 5 at this point. So it's pretty much what we expected.
Yeah, certainly if you look at some of the research out there as far as the upgrade rates, it is certainly pretty rapid. And so I'm sure you all probably are pretty confident that you have iOS 5 devices already in your enterprise. And so hopefully these webinars are of use to you and can think about what you need to do to manage these devices since they already are present in on your network. All right, so first up is some of the new restrictions. And in particular, one of the most major questions that we get a lot is the iCloud controls. So I think as people are kind of learning more about this, they're kind of making some a little more educated decisions about what to do with it. But we do offer some pretty strong controls on iCloud. We let you actually turn on and off the various sync options. These include the document sync. Document sync essentially lets you have an over-the-air, in the background synchronization for all document types, things like PowerPoint slides, Word documents, presentations, and between your laptop as well as all your iOS devices. And so, for example, if you're working on a presentation on your laptop in, say, Keynote, you can actually take that as it is and actually just walk away from your computer with your iPad and pick up where you left off with no action on your side. It's all in the background, ready to go as soon as you get there. So it's a really nice productivity enhancement, but there is, just keep in mind, that sync process happening over the air in the cloud there. The other thing we can do here is also back up or prevent the backup to iCloud of the device. And this is pretty similar to the iTunes backup that took place in iOS 4 and still can take place in iOS 5. However, just keep in mind that we can disable that iCloud backup to prevent that going up to the cloud. So if you do that, just keep in mind that if they don't have a laptop with them and it is a standalone deployment option, they might not be able to back up their device. And that could be a cause of concern, so just keep that in mind there. PhotoStream is a way to kind of have a live stream of the last 1,000 photos that have been taken across any user's iTunes account. And essentially, whether you take photos on iPhoto from your camera or from your iOS devices, those will be automatically uploaded to the cloud. So we can actually turn that off for a particular device. One thing to keep in mind here is that when you turn it off, we actually also clear the PhotoStream, essentially the last photos. So if the user actually hasn't saved them elsewhere, those could potentially be lost. So that's just an important thing to note there when kind of disabling PhotoStream, is that it does clear off that 1,000 last photos as part of that functionality there. The last part of iCloud controls that we do offer, again, to turn on or turn off is the key value pairs. And that's essentially settings information, sort of like you can kind of think about like an on-iFile file back in the old days of Windows. Kind of settings, last page you run in a book, or maybe some login information. Nothing too big, but sort of just some pretty basic settings information.
All right, we're going to open up our second poll right now, and what we're going to ask is, are you planning on using iCloud in your organization?
Yeah. And while I wait for that one to come through, the last bit in this slide is really, I think our recommendation would be to try and take a holistic approach to iCloud. So it's really not just for iOS devices. You can also hook into iCloud via the web through iCloud.com, or also through PCs. And you can see there on the screenshot on the right there that, and that's a screenshot from my computer, that I can actually also sync data and documents from my laptop. And so if you're going to try and block it because of concerns on iOS devices, you should probably also be mindful of the current state on laptops as well, just so you don't have those documents being uploaded and synced through that method and not on the iOS devices.
Okay, so we've got the results there, and I guess, at this point, I'd say that, people are kind of taking a wait-and-see approach, probably educating themselves and, kind of watching and waiting right now seems to be what the majority of folks' position towards iCloud is right now.
Yeah, it's certainly pretty powerful, definitely a productivity enhancement, but I think, at least I can understand some of the concerns around how it works. All right. So the next step here is some more restrictions. These include things like Siri. One of the things that's been in the news quite frequently is that Siri, while very popular, certainly as I'm sure many of you have seen the various questions you can ask Siri and her fairly humorous responses. However, also in the news is the fact that you can actually interact with Siri while the device is locked. This actually is a pretty powerful helpful tool while, say, traveling on the road. Your device is probably locked, but you can also get it to send emails, change calendar invitations, send text messages without having to kind of, find your device, unlock it, and then use it. So you can certainly see why it's possible to do that, but just keep in mind that if someone does find your device and Siri listens to their voice, potentially that person could send some content, whether it be text messages or emails. So we do have the option to take control of Siri. Unfortunately, at this point in time, it's really just an option to turn her off or turn her on, and so we can't actually control the lock functionality, but we do have the option there to take that control if you are concerned about some of that functionality that is available while the device is locked. Two other options that we also have new in iOS 5 is to require the iTunes password for all transactions. Previously, it would be cached for some period of time, and so if you entered it recently, you wouldn't have to enter it again for some time. With this option, you can actually require the iTunes password to be entered for all transactions, and that just is a little extra security there to try and prevent any kind of potential unauthorized use of the iTunes Store while on the device. The last option is to disable the untrusted certificate prompts. Right now with iOS devices, in general, most of them will ask the user if they visit a site that's untrusted, whether or not they want to trust that certificate or ignore the error. This option will actually disable that prompt and block the user from accessing those sites. If you do actually turn this off and disable those prompts, just make sure that you do push down your self-signed root certificates for all of your internal sites, just to make sure that they can still access them with this option turned off. And we can actually help you there, pushing those down to devices as well to make sure that those certificates are present.
Yeah, so that's kind of one of the nice features of MDM done over the air, is that you don't need the device to be in an IT person's hands in order to do those kinds of things or enable those kinds of things.
All right, so some of the new active sync settings. These are potentially also some of the more popular features. And really what these are doing is to try and help sandbox some of those corporate email accounts a little bit better than previously. So there's two new options here on the security improvement side. We can prevent the moving of mail to other accounts. So previously with iOS 4, you could take an email that was in your corporate inbox, for example, and then move that mail to your personal email account that was configured. And the iOS device would simply dutifully move that email from folder to folder and that content would then be on your personal mail account. This can now be stopped in iOS 5, along with the option to forward mail out of other accounts. So presently, again, on iOS 4, if you hit the forward button, you have the option of picking what source email account you want that email to be sent out of. With this option set, they would not have the choice, and it would be locked down to the source email account the original email was sent to. So that's a pretty strong security there. There really is not many reasons not to enable this feature. There's not many use cases essentially for moving mail between accounts, especially on a corporate versus personal account. So
all it represents is risk. So
right.
Why not just eliminate it?
Exactly, and there's not much of a limitation here on the user's productivity. So there's not much of a downside. The next option here is to actually prevent third-party apps from sending mail. And you've probably seen this before. If you go into the Photos application and you wanted to email a photo to someone, you really can't attach that photo from within the email application. So if you want to do that, you actually have to go to the Photos application, click the Share button, and then pick Email. And in that email list would then have a drop-down of what email accounts you wanted to use for that email. And with this option essentially set, you can actually prevent the corporate account from being an option to send those third-party apps emails via. So in this case, if you went to the Photos app, you would only pick that personal account and not your corporate account. This, again, is a kind of way to prevent unauthorized attachments from being sent to your corporate mail account. However, keep in mind that this applies to all third-party applications. So things like Keynote and Pages would also not be able to send documents out as well.
What about if you had like a custom app that your corporation had built? Would it kind of be restricted in the same way?
It's a global setting. So anything that uses the mail app sheet would be blocked. So some potential benefits there, but also some potential downsides to keep in mind when thinking about that particular setting. The last option here is SMIME support. SMIME is a way to essentially sign and encrypt email messages. It's been around for quite some time, and iOS 5 has now added support for it. So you are able to leverage a user certificate and actually encrypt and sign those emails, and then also verify that other people sending you mails are, again, trusted. And so what you'll see is a little kind of icon there on the email when you get an email that says it has been trusted and the user is who they say they are based on the certificate of trust. So if you do want to take advantage of this functionality, you do require, of course, certificates on the device and integration with the PKI server as well. So chances are you probably already know if you want to use this feature or not based on whether you have deployed across your organization. All right. So onto the Wi-Fi settings. There's some pretty major functionality that was added here in the form of proxy support. Previously on iOS 4, you were only able to configure VPN settings with a proxy. So if you had a Wi-Fi proxy server or a proxy that was required to be used in your Wi-Fi network, you actually could not set it remotely. The user would have to go into their Wi-Fi settings on their own device and manually set that information. It couldn't be set over the air. And so now in iOS 5, you can actually then now push these proxy information for a particular Wi-Fi signal and have that be used by the device. So it's a pretty nice benefit for people who use proxy servers on their networks. The final setting for Wi-Fi that's been added is also the encryption type. So now you can actually pick whether it's no encryption, WPA, which includes essentially WPA and WPA2 types, and then any. And what this will help do is actually try and restrict similar types of network configurations with the same SSID from perhaps being open and being connected to when your real intent was to have your corporate signal connected via WPA. So there's a little extra security there on these signals and profiles that are pushed.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to say, I mean, these kind of things are the things that kind of, really make Apple, kind of stronger in the enterprise, right? Because, pack files and things like that are typically things that, you only run into when you're operating in corporate environments. You really don't run into proxies or certainly not pack files, kind of out in the wild or in home networks. So, it really kind of shows kind of, I think, that commitment towards, making sure that the platform, is really enterprise usable.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, So the last new set of functionalities added on iOS 5, as far as policy is concerned, is the roaming settings. So previously, you could actually report on whether or not they had roaming turned on, but you couldn't really take any action. And so now with iOS 5, you can actually set whether the device should enable or disable data and voice roaming. And this can be set, again, over the air by the administrators. The one thing to keep in mind here on these settings is that unlike the previous restrictions, which when set, the user actually could not override, essentially it was locked down and grayed out and disabled, these settings can still be overridden by the user. So if the user is traveling internationally and their phone was set to essentially disable voice roaming, they can go into their device and always turn it back on again. That said, if they do that, we still have the option again of turning it back off again. But again, just keep in mind that they can always go back in and turn it back on again. And that's just how this has been designed for the user. So with that in mind, our recommendation would be to try and use these in conjunction with messaging the user. So if you do turn it off or do turn it on, let the user know why and let them know they actually are doing this. And that way they'll know that it's not simply the last thing on their device, but it's actually that this has been set that way for a particular reason, and your corporation doesn't want them roaming, for example, while traveling, or hasn't been approved, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But these are pretty powerful tools here to hopefully help you take control of some of your cellular roaming costs and data roaming costs.
Yeah, and this is certainly an area that we get asked about a lot. With our customers who buy Mass 360 MDM, one of the things they always want to be able to at least understand is who's roaming, can I turn it off or on, where are people in terms of their usage, can we somehow shape usage, or at least make people aware of where they stand against their cap plans. So it's certainly a big area of interest, and as you kind of pointed out, up front on this particular topic, it's still fundamentally a user-driven world as far as usage of the device goes. It is very difficult for corporations to literally lock down or prevent data usage or voice usage for that matter. And I think that just kind of keeps coming back to the point that at the end of the day, the device is there to serve the end user, and the corporation needs to kind of work around that or work with that. So with that, we're done with most of the slideware, and we're going to jump into a quick demo. So I'm going to make Josh the presenter here, and give us a second, and he'll share his browser.
Yeah.
There we go. So hopefully you're all seeing that.
All right. So I've gone ahead and logged into our Mass 360 product here, and it's essentially a pretty bare bones setup. Something that you would see if you just kind of got started here with our product, which you again can later on demand whenever you want to. And so I've got one device enrolled here, as you can tell above, and kind of just got it going here today. So it's pretty easy to measure policies across all your devices, but we'll focus on, again, of course, the iOS 5 functionality. So just go to the menu here, and then pick Manage Device Policies. And you'll now see a listing of the various policies that have been set up for devices. Again, this is a pretty fresh installation here, so I only have two. We'll pick ahead our default iOS MDM policy. And now you can go ahead and see what information I have set here. I'll go ahead and click the Edit button to change some of these values. And you can see that we can set the classic passcode policies. These haven't changed since iOS 4. But moving on down to the restrictions, you can start to see all those new settings that we talked about a couple minutes ago. Things like the password entry, the untrusted TLS prompt, as well as those iCloud settings. Again, it's really as easy as simply unchecking these boxes here. So if I didn't want iCloud in my enterprise, I could easily uncheck them, click Save and Publish, and all my devices will now have iCloud blocked on those devices. So it's really about a 30-second job here to take control of iCloud or other options across your enterprise.
Right, so that's kind of really key. If you're in that group of 55% there who said, I'm just not sure yet, you want to make sure that until you are sure that you're not going to have it enabled, right?
Yeah. And again, you can also pick and choose. So if you want to allow the cloud backup, potentially because you have some devices that are out there that don't have a laptop associated with them, that is pretty important. So maybe you do want that, and maybe you don't really mind the photo stream, but you definitely don't want the document synchronization. So you can pick and choose these, and it's really quite easy. Moving on down to the Wi-Fi signals, again, it's similarly just as easy. You can pick what type of signal you want to use, and then down below you do see those new options there for iOS 5. So for example, here I can pick a manual proxy, and I can see the information there for address name, address, port information, as well as username and password, as well as automatic for a pack file. And those options automatically switch based on which option you choose. And then above, you can also, again, pick those options for any WPA or none. In this case, we can go with WPA. VPN, haven't really been any changes here. So we do support, again, the major options here for VPN. Moving on down to ActiveSync, I did actually go in here and set up the basic options for one of our mail accounts. And so you can see here, down below, the options that prevent moving mail to other accounts, as well as the third-party apps from sending mail. So in this case, I'm actually going to go back here and disable this option, because I do want options to send mail from our PowerPoint and other applications for working, and not to block those from users. And so, but however, we will leave that moving mail to other accounts blocked, simply because there really isn't many options or many real use cases for doing that in a business scenario.
And one other thing I'd just point out here, right? So we all know the classic, paradigm for how people get their mobile devices connected to Exchange, right? They go in through the mobile device itself, and they key in a bunch of these parameters when they're setting up, a mailbox. And assuming, as we find, most corporations don't have any type of quarantine process in place, the device immediately connects to the Exchange environment, mail starts flowing, tasks, calendars, contacts start flowing, and of course the IT folks have no clue that this has all happened, because that knowledge about how to go do that and what the parameters are that you need to type in is kind of water cooler type of knowledge that just kind of spreads via osmosis around the company. And this is typically how that Exchange environment gets out of control very quickly. So one nice thing about this is you can push these things out, and that accomplishes two things for you. One, it kind of allows you to control to some degree who's getting pushed the profile to get connected to email, but it also helps on that support side when they try to do it and can't, or inevitably type in the wrong thing. You don't get a help desk call kind of asking you, well, why can't I get my mail on this device? So this is a nice feature. I just wanted to make sure people understood what it was there for and how they used it.
Thanks, Joe. And again, the last option we talked about on here was the roaming settings. It's pretty easy to set up again here. You can actually turn it on, turn it off, and then make those policies public here by publishing them, which we'll do right now. And then my devices will actually go out and get these new policies within the next minute or two. And it's really that easy to go ahead and take control of all these new iOS 5 features. You're now seeing the publish confirmation screen, a listing of all the changes that I made across on my policy here. Go ahead and confirm that. And now my devices are going to start being updated with a new policy. In this case, I'll now lose the access to DocSync across iCloud. It's really about that easy.
Great. Yeah, and so I think this is kind of one of these areas where I really think this is where our cloud model really shines, right? We had all of this support in our platform for our customers to try. Frankly, the day that Apple launched iOS 5, and it was it's just a great benefit for people, right? No server software to update, anything else. You wake up, the controls are there, you can start using them, and you can kind of move on from there. So we're going to just jump right back into the PowerPoint slides for 1 minute, and then we'll start handling some questions. So you've got some questions. You can send them in via chat or Q&A now, and Josh and I will do our best, Josh probably more than I, to handle those. But let me just jump down to the end here.
Okay, so just to do a quick review, as far as what we covered today, was the new restrictions with iCloud in particular, Siri, the untrusted sites, and the iTunes password. New options for ActiveSync, that includes SMIME support and the sandboxing options of the preventing third-party apps, as well as the preventing of moving mail to other accounts, followed by the Wi-Fi settings with proxy support and encryption types, as well as the control you can have over roaming settings as far as voice and data roaming controls go. And so that was the main topics we covered today. And I think we have one more poll heading out here.
Yeah, so we're going to run our last poll here, and we're simply asking you, assuming you've got iOS devices that are already in your environment, we're asking you kind of how you're picking them up. Are employees buying them and bringing them in, and you're allowing that, or is the company itself provisioning them, or are you giving folks a stipend? And obviously, we'd also like to know if there's a little bit of a difference there between iPhones and iPads in terms of how corporations are going about enabling them in terms of getting them on, getting them in people's hands. So that's the point of that. So that is really the wrap here for the information today.
Yep. So to wrap up, a large percent of your users are already running iOS 5. I think that was definitely confirmed by our first poll here, where I think it was around 80% of you all have already upgraded, and so you can probably imagine that a lot of your users already have as well. We definitely recommend you, for that major reason, to take advantage and control the new features today and not wait until sometime in the future, because these are being used by users right now. And we do have one more upcoming webinar in the iOS 5 series, and that is November 10th, and it is the deep dive and demo of iOS 5 app management. And so this is pretty exciting, the ability to push as well as pull applications off of the iOS 5 devices.
Right, and folks have been asking for this for years now, for mobile devices. They want, the IT guys especially, kind of want it to behave like the way a PC behaves with the install and uninstall engine.
So if you can't wait and you want to take advantage of this today and you don't have an MDM solution that currently supports iOS 5, you can definitely call today's host, and that's Joe. See how his contact information there. And a little bit about us. Again, we are Master60. We do have an instant MDM platform. You can get started right now today. It is a cloud-based SaaS service, nothing to install. The free trial can be started right there at our web link, master60.com. And again, we do have iOS 5 features supported today. And so really, as Joe mentioned before, we had these features rolled out day one for iOS 5, and without any of our current customers worrying about upgrading the servers to support that.
Yep. So nobody had to lift a finger. You all just got a link. If you want to try the eval, we'd obviously encourage you to do that. Honestly, you can get started in 5 minutes. I've gotten accounts provisioned and gotten my first iPhone enrolled in 10 minutes when I'm really flying, and that's with a VNC server in between it all. So it really is that quick, that easy. Hey, one last thing here before we jump to the Q&A, just on the poll results. So, I'll be honest with you, I'm not surprised that the way most iPads are making it in is through the corporate-owned route, so 70% of you. Frankly, I'm a little bit surprised how many now are making the iPhone a corporate sanctioned or corporate available device, and I certainly hear that more and more every day. Especially, I hear it a lot when people first see our solution and they say, you know what, I was never really comfortable that I was going to be able to get the same kind of control with an iOS environment that I have with my BlackBerry Bez environment. But now that I've tried this, I can see that, and we're going to make the iPhone an available option through the corporation as a mobile device people can use. So I hear that story every day. I'm sure you guys do too. So that data certainly seems to correlate. Stipends, I agree, it's just not a very common way right now, and of course everybody's trying to figure out how to support employee-owned devices. So no big surprise with all that. We're going to jump into the Q&A right now, and what we'll do our best here to kind of pick and choose. So, there were a lot of comments and questions that came in along the way about, asking us to kind of make a statement about iCloud security, and obviously it's not our technology; it's part of the, iOS platform itself. So I think it's really kind of not our place to really kind of get into that part of it. I think what we would say is make sure you understand it, and Apple has certainly made the control that you need to handle it in the appropriate way for your organization available, and you can certainly take advantage of it. So I think that's kind of the most sensible way I could give to kind of that question. Give me a second here, and I'll scroll down a little bit, getting through all the folks that were having trouble hearing early on. So there was a question, Josh, that came in about can you, I guess it was related to the way you were assigning policies, and the question was, can you do this to groups of devices?
Yes, absolutely. So we have a pretty flexible way to set up groups of devices. You can do it based on any attribute that we collect, whether it's user-based or device-based. And so you can push it based on, say, iOS version, or you could push it based on a user's LDAP group that they're in. It's pretty flexible in that respect, and you can essentially make these groups as you see fit and then assign policies to those groups.
Okay, so there's a question here. What's the middleware you're using to manage the devices?
There really isn't much of middleware there. So we have our solution which talks directly to the iOS devices. And so there really isn't anything between us and, say, the Apple iOS software present on the device.
Yeah, so another question came in kind of saying, geez, I saw you had an Android policy there as well. Can you manage Android devices with MAZ 360 as well as iPhones? And the answer is yes. So you can manage, frankly, any mobile device through MAZ 360. So iPhones and iPads, iOS devices, iPod Touches even, Android tablets and smartphones, as well as any device that can be managed via ActiveSync, as well as BlackBerry devices that are connected through BlackBerry Enterprise servers. So just about anything that you see out there today can in fact be managed through MAZ 360. There's a question about how in a cloud environment do you get a kind of a QA sandbox to test things. And I think we've certainly got a lot of best practices around how you do that in a cloud. One of them is certainly device groups, right? So we would never suggest that policy changes be pushed to production devices without them first being tested in some way, shape, or form. And we can accommodate that very simply by, just actually adding putting the set of devices you want to do your testing on in a device group set up for that purpose. Create your policies, configure them the way you want, assign those policies to that particular test group, monitor your results, and based on your results, then go forward with promoting those changes to your production devices or your non-test devices. That kind of cover it? So it's actually pretty sensible and easy in a cloud environment, I think, and it's something you can do kind of on the fly. So there's another question coming in about does MAZ 360 support private app deployment?
Yep, so the answer there is certainly we do. We have a pretty rich app management functionality today, and we'll go over that in a much more detail in 2 weeks. So I would tell you to definitely stay tuned for the upcoming webinar there. But the short answer is we do support both public and private applications for both Android and iOS devices, and can manage those accordingly. Right,
and so one thing, for folks who've never seen it, the integration with the public app stores, or Apple App Store, Google Market, or Android Market is really pretty slick, the way that works.
Yeah, we try to really make it as easy as possible to both list public applications in your corporate app catalog, as well as any integration with the volume purchase programs and things like that for Apple to help manage those as well.
Yeah, and I was helping a partner of ours yesterday. They have a custom app that they wanted to deploy. We went from creating an account through MAZ, enrolling a couple of Android devices, and pushing the first app out, and I think the whole process took us about 25 minutes. So, I mean, it really is that, quick and easy. And these guys had, frankly, never even seen MAS 360 before, and I just walked them through it via WebEx. So it really is great to be able to do that kind of stuff. There's a question about remote desktop services on iOS devices. I don't think that's really an area where there's a lot today.
Well, certainly there are a lot of apps to do remote desktop connections to other servers and other devices. So that direction is certainly supported. There really isn't any way to take remote control over iOS devices without doing anything to impact the device's security model. And so, unfortunately, that direction is not really supported.
Right, and that's kind of across the industry, right? Since the platform doesn't support it, it's really kind of difficult for anyone. So there's a question about blocking devices from connecting to corporate email. So it is a function of MAS 360, and so we call that auto quarantining. And so we can integrate with auto quarantine capabilities in the ABQ list in Exchange 2010, as well as we have our own proprietary mechanism for implementing auto quarantine in Exchange 2007 environments, which doesn't natively support it. And frankly, that is one of the typically the first features customers typically want to enable that are Exchange ActiveSync shops with our service. So that's a very popular one. So a couple people asked that question. Question about a selective wipe. Can you remove corporate documents from the device?
Yeah, and that's a good question, and we'll try and target the iOS platform since that was the focus of today's webinar versus Android, which does handle things a bit differently. So in general, with selective wipe, what we do is I actually pull off those policy settings which you saw before, things like Wi-Fi, email, and VPN accounts. And that way they kind of lose access to the corporate systems as well as have all their email content deleted off the device. Once you kind of go into the app management functionality a little bit more in detail, in 2 weeks, you can also remove those applications that were pushed by the corporate accounts as well. So if you push down, say, Keynote, and then did a selective wipe and one of those applications removed, we would also pull off, say, the Keynote application as well as all associated documents.
Great. What end-user self-service is available? So this is a feature we've got.
Yep.
So I'll let you talk about that one, Josh.
Sure. So we have our self-service portal, which users can log into. It is optional. Some folks don't want to have it, but for those that do, it is there. And it allows the user to look at their device, see what's installed, and also perform some basic actions. Things like clearing their passcode in case they forgot it, kicking off a wipe in case they lost their device, as well as, of course, checking on the location of it as well.
There's a question about whether you need to install a MAS 360 app on the device to receive or manage policy commands.
Yep, so the answer is no. You don't have to have a MAS 360 app on the device. We have the option to have a web-based enrollment, which means you can actually have your telecom department or a third party do your provisioning for you and actually have them enrolled in device management through those folks without actually having to ever enter an iTunes ID. And so that's a really great benefit that we have about making the application optional, is that we can support those workflows there to have them kind of pre-provisioned for MDM without a personal iTunes account being necessary to install the app. Certainly, once the user gets them, we do have the application that is optional again. It does provide some additional functionality, things like location detection, jailbreak detection, messaging, and documents. And so you have those benefits, but it's not required.
Yeah, and that's all on the iOS side. On the Android side, there is an agent that gets downloaded from the Android market that serves the same purpose. And then in Exchange ActiveSync environments where you're only going to use ActiveSync to manage the device, there's no MAS 360 software that needs to be out on that endpoint. We do everything via the ActiveSync agent that's embedded on the device. Question about whether or not you can manage, I guess the question is really consumer-based devices through MAS, and I'd say, yeah, that's probably, frankly, one of our top use cases. So companies want to allow their employees to use their personal devices for work, yet want to make sure that the corporation can maintain the security posture, and has the management tools that they need to manage the device effectively. And so, MAS 360 is completely device agnostic, network agnostic. All the device needs is access to the internet in some way, shape, or form, whether that's via a cellular network or a Wi-Fi network.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I think I had one question earlier that we can hit here, and that is that we can manage the devices either via the cell connection or via the Wi-Fi connection. So certainly iPad with only Wi-Fi connections can be managed similar to iPod Touches. And again, if even your iPhone traveling internationally and you have data roaming turned off, but you hit a Wi-Fi signal, we'll certainly see the device come online and can manage it that way. So certainly, even while you're traveling, you can still hit them.
Right. So there's a question about, so if a device is only on the WLAN, how do you actually talk to it since it's behind a corporate firewall? So that's a good question.
Yep. So the structure of how this works is that the devices themselves maintain a link to Apple's push notification service. And this is a common channel that is used for a huge number of applications on the device, and it's a common channel for purposes of battery use and other things. And so what we do is we leverage that to essentially notify the device that we want to talk to it. And then once that happens, the device then reaches out to our servers outbound over SSL on 443. And using the proxy server, again, if that's been configured, and we'll then send those commands down that way. And so, again, it's an outbound connection, and so generally those are allowed by the firewall. Essentially, if you can browse the internet, we can manage the device.
Yeah, and in the case of Android, the story is the same. Android's equivalent of APNS is called C2DM, and it fundamentally works the same way. So there's a question here. So those of you who may or may not know, in order to manage devices, iOS devices specifically, through any MDM tool, you need to get what's called an APNS certificate from Apple in order to manage that device. And one of the changes that's occurred recently from Apple that's been certainly much appreciated by all of us in the MDM community is some changes to the rules and regulations about how you go about getting those APNS certs. So I'm going to let Josh talk a little bit about that because these changes are pretty significant.
Yep, sure. So previously you had to be a member of the Enterprise Developer Program. That required a DUNS number if you're a private company or some other validation if you are a government or NGO or type operation. And that the validation there would take between a couple of weeks, 1 to 1+, depending on what was going on and how many people were in front of you. And they would essentially call a legal contact and validate that you are capable of binding the company to contracts. So it was a pretty lengthy process. It costed $299 a year and did require some tax information, DUNS numbers, and some other stuff. So that has been streamlined, and now essentially anyone with an Apple ID, which is free, can request a MDM certificate. However, you do need to get that request signed by one of the MDM vendors that Apple supports. And so we can do it for you. Essentially, send us a request, we'll sign it. You can then upload it to Apple, and then you're on your way.
Fantastic.
It takes about 5-10 minutes.
Wow. I mean, it's just a huge change in how that whole ecosystem used to work. So there's a question about can MAS 360 manage BES servers, manage BlackBerry servers, or manage BlackBerries via BES server, and the answer is yes. So we have a piece of software called the MAS 360 Cloud Extender that can connect into BES servers, Active Directory servers, Notes Traveler servers, Exchange ActiveSync servers, and provides kind of the communication path between the MAS 360 platform and the internal servers in your environment. It's a pretty lightweight, thin piece of software and can typically be installed in a VMware type of a scenario. All it needs is access to those devices over the network, the servers that you want to integrate it with over the network, and then I think outbound back out to us, port 443 outbound, which is usually open through firewalls. So it doesn't take a whole lot to get it up and running and installed, which is good. And once it's installed and running, yes, you will see your BlackBerry devices in MAS 360. You will be able to send actions to those devices through MAS 360, and you will be able to assign those Bez BlackBerry devices to policies that you've configured on your Bez server. So we are able to do that, and simultaneously you'll see all of your iPhones, iPads, Androids, and anything else that you're managing with MAS in that same environment along with those BlackBerry devices.
And just to clarify, I had another question here. There is no more need to pay the $299 per year for the developer program. Essentially, it's just the Apple ID, and there's some documentation if you go to Apple's MDM site. Kind of scroll down a bit, and down there you'll have some more information directly from Apple on the new process for getting that MDM certificate.
Yeah, so when, I guess the question here is about the way the proxy integration works, which is, when the device is on Wi-Fi, obviously in this case a corporate WLAN, and there's a proxy that the traffic's coming in and out of, will there be filtering of it? And I think it all depends on how the proxy's configured, right?
Yeah, certainly if you had proxy server set up to do some kind of filtering or other mechanism, that should play
exactly
to the same extent that it would work with the laptop as well.
So a few questions here about how do you buy MAS 360? Well, it's pretty simple. Our model is per device per month. Obviously, the price varies depending on the number of devices that you want to protect. But that's it. That's your all-in price. There's no setup fees, no maintenance fees, no support fees. It is literally the number of devices you want to manage times the monthly device fee times the number of months you want to have us provide the service for you. Another question, I think this is more about MAS itself. Can you delegate control of certain capabilities to folks? So I think it's really more like a role-based admin question for people who would use MAS 360 to manage these devices.
Yep, certainly. So as you may expect from a SaaS-based platform, we do have a pretty flexible rights and roles system. And so you can create custom roles for your admins. They can be anything from a read-only role to a role that could only do limited actions to a role that can potentially change policies. And essentially, you can create these as you see fit and as you need, and assign your admins to those various groups.
Yeah, and that's certainly one of the features we get a lot of good feedback on. So here's a question: can you specifically restrict what is backed up via iCloud? So I think it's more like, can you, is it all or nothing, or is there certain bits and pieces you can turn on or off? How much granularity is there?
Yeah, so there are 4 options, and that is essentially the iCloud backup, and that is, you can think of it like the iTunes backup, where it really kind of collects a lot of the application data as well as other content on the device and sends that to iCloud. So it works pretty similarly. It's just that it's not over USB and it's not on your laptop, it's on the cloud. So in that respect, there isn't much control you can have over that particular function. But you can, of course, disable the synchronizing of key-value pairs, SodaStream, and documents.
Mm-hmm. Question about what type of reporting do you have in MAS 360? I think this is certainly one of our strengths.
Yeah, so we have a couple of different ways to do reporting in MAS 360. We have what we call our smart search, where you can actually kind of do instant, on-demand, real-time searches and filtering. And so you can kind of build a report based on what attributes you want to search for, whether it's iOS 5 devices that have a certain carrier, or maybe it's devices in a certain country. You can kind of build these certain queries and then export that information out to CSV or Excel. You can also customize what columns are in that report as well. And then we also have sort of our own reports that we have for things like software inventory, hardware inventory, security compliance reports, and these things are more of the charts and graphs type reports rather than the free-form type option I was talking about before.
Mm-hmm. A question, this is, basically what's MAS 360's, kind of key differentiator in the marketplace. So I thank someone for teeing this one up for us. So I think our key differentiators, I'd probably say, are 2. One is certainly we are completely cloud-based. So, that is a huge advantage for corporations in terms of speed to deploy, effort to maintain, and really lets you get to the value that you're looking for as quickly as possible, and then obviously all the cost benefits that kind of come along with that. So that cloud model is one, and you'll certainly hear lots of people say they've got a cloud option. You need to kind of dig under the covers and make sure you understand whether that's a true cloud-based platform that's multi-tenant, or whether that's an hosted appliance type model where the servers that would have been in your data center we're going to take out and stick over at rack space, and we're going to nail up a point-to-point VPN between it all to make it look like it's in the cloud, even though really all we did was just take some boxes and move them from data center A to data center B. So make sure you understand that distinction, because it's important, because that hosted appliance model still comes with all the maintenance of any type of on-prem solution in terms of needing to monitor devices, upgrade devices, all that, and a true cloud-based model doesn't come with any of that. So that's certainly one advantage. I think the other big advantage that we've got is that MAS 360 can be a single interface to manage all your mobile devices. So we've talked specifically today and talk often about smartphones and tablets and all the different varieties of those devices that we can manage via MAS 360. But MAS 360 really started life as a platform for managing laptops, when that was what people meant when they said mobile device. So MAS 360 can also manage Windows and Mac OS X laptops as well as any other device. So if you're looking for a single system to manage your entire fleet of mobile devices, there really isn't anything else in a cloud-based model that's out there that does that. So I think that's kind of what makes us different. So what security, here's another question that came in. What security do you use to secure data within the cloud service?
Yeah, and so I think that's a pretty complicated one to answer real quick on the phone here, but it is an important question. And we really have, not to gloss over too much, but a number of various options and technologies we use to secure that data. And recently we've actually gotten FISMA certified, for example, on our cloud service. And so we are one of the few and very few companies to have that for our cloud service. We are very proud. It took a lot of effort and work and working with various folks to make that happen, but we are FISMA certified as well as all the typical certifications you see for a cloud service, things like SAS 70, which I think has been renamed now, but those things. So certainly if you have concerns around how we do this, we can get into more detailed conversation, but at a high level, we're on the leading edge here of getting the cloud security certifications and making sure that our customers are protected.
Yeah, so there's a lot of questions coming in now kind of around all this. So kind of just so you understand, I mean, we've been at this cloud game for 8 years now with MAS 360. And so, we've, figured out sometimes the easy way, sometimes the hard way, all the things you need to know and do to be successful offering a cloud-based service. So some of that becomes apparent with things like our SAS 70 audits, which we've had every year since 2007. Our FISMA certification, which we just got, which if you're in the public sector, you would know exactly what FISMA is, but it's an Information Security Act that I think was part of laws enacted in 2003. So we recently got that. We're one of 3 cloud-based services that has it. The other 2 may be companies you've heard of. One's called Google Apps, the other's called Salesforce.com, and the third is MAS 360. And last week we were given approval to work with Cyberscope, which is another federal government system for maintaining the posture of mobile devices and kind of assessing them in real time. So, we really take it seriously, and we work hard to make sure that, it's a fundamental part of the platform. There's a bunch of questions coming in about the types of information we collect. So there's things like IMEI, ICCID, MAC address of each adapter. Yes, absolutely. Almost any physical thing, battery, screen size, battery condition, stuff off the SIM, almost anything you can scrape off a device, including the software installed, is stuff that we will pull back into MAS, and you'd be able to view and manage through MAS 360. So you can certainly do all of that. Is there a policy or setting to disable ActiveSync? No, not really. There's an auto quarantine process for preventing devices from getting mail via ActiveSync, but disabling it wouldn't necessarily. Yeah, we can block them until they're approved by you as an administrator, but our platform wouldn't be the place to do that. I mean, I think fundamentally, if you wanted to disable ActiveSync, don't turn on the ActiveSync server don't turn on the ActiveSync server on your Exchange server, and that's probably the easiest way to disable it.
Yeah, and just to add some color there, we can certainly block devices through our solution, and that can actually happen in a variety of automated ways. So you can actually set up things like a rule to automatically block jailbroken devices, and that way they would be prevented from accessing mail. And certainly you can do it that way. But as far as if you wanted to try and block ActiveSync company-wide, of course, the best option, as Joe mentioned, is probably just turn it off on the server side.
So there's a question about people, an attendee who's using EAS. That's where most people start, and where most people still are. And the way you integrate MAS into an EAS environment is really pretty simple. You install the MAS 360 Cloud Extender. We'll find all of the mobile devices that are partnered with your Exchange mailboxes. We'll load all that information up into MAS, and that whole process takes maybe 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the size of your environment. And once they're in, you can immediately begin to manage them, assign them to policies. If they are iPhone or iOS or Android devices, you could opt to then at that point enroll them in MAS directly and take advantage of more advanced features like locate the device that ActiveSync doesn't support for you. And the other big advantage you get by doing this is you get to manage the devices at the device level versus the mailbox level, which is how EAS manages things. You assign policies to a mailbox regardless of the number of devices that are paired to that mailbox. And that is one of the kind of bigger flaws in trying to do MDM completely through ActiveSync. So it's really simple. It's actually one of our strengths. Can you block users from downloading apps? Good question.
Yeah, that's a great question, and we can, and we have a couple of ways of doing that. We can block the entire public app store, and that's a real big hammer to essentially turn off all the downloading of applications. And we can also blacklist as well as whitelist applications. And so if a user installs something which is either blocked or outside of your allow list of applications, we can then take automatic action on that device, whether it's blocking email, removing access to email off the device and deleting it, or potentially anything up to wiping the device.
Great. So there's a lot of questions around assigning policies to devices and groupings. So we've got frankly, I think as much flexibility as you need in terms of being able to group devices in as many ways as you need to, as well as be able to have policies that are assigned to specific devices if you really want to get down into that level of granularity. And we can also integrate with Active Directory so that policy assignments can be done via Active Directory by just changing what OU or role users are in. So there's a lot of flexibility there, a lot of different ways to do it. So there's tons of questions. I appreciate them all. Matter of fact, I know we're not going to be able to get to all of them today, but we're a few minutes over. Tons of folks have stayed around for the entire hour. We appreciate that, Josh and I certainly. I want to thank you all for attending. For those of you who we couldn't get to your questions, or you wanted to evaluate MAS 360 and you asked us via the chat or Q&A, we'll follow up with you and get your questions answered or get you going with an eval. So we'd obviously love to have you try the product. Josh will be back in 2 weeks for the third and final webinar. So hopefully if you found this useful, I think you'll really find the next one useful because that app management is such a hot topic in MDM today. So thanks again for everyone for hanging around. Hope you can make it again in 2 weeks for our final webinar on the iOS 5 series. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.